No, we are recording.
Yeah, I was just gonna remind you.
We're recording.
Okay, look at this shirt.
Love it.
Okay, now this is a silk shirt. This is actually a, I believe, this is a Tommy Bahama, I believe. I
Mm-hmm.
do have some Tommy Bahamas. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and usually my wife likes me. She would get me Tommy Bahamas.
Mm-hmm.
But I wore this last night to the garden club, and it's more orange than red. You can tell.
Yes. Welcome to the Art Hustle Gallery Conversations. Welcome back here, Bill Schiavo. What shirt are you wearing today in this like
I am wearing
ongoing
yes, I'm
conversation
wearing
of
a
shirts?
silk shirt,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And this one is actually not, I don't call it, this is a Tommy Bahama shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have lots of really very nice silk flowered shirts.
Yeah.
I have a number of Tommy Bahamas.
And Tommy Bahama is like one of the, popular ones, right? For
Yeah,
Hawaiian
yeah, but
shirts or vacation shirts.
my favorite silk shirts though are really the Hawaiian ones from the Hawaiian um, designers like Tori Richard and Rain Spooner, and there's a whole
Mm-hmm.
bunch of Iolani. I mean, there's a whole bunch. So those are kind of my favorites of my silk shirts, and then of course
Mm-hmm.
of my rayon shirts, they're mostly Jam's World shirts because they're
Mm-hmm.
very brightly colored
Mm-hmm.
and they're also very light. They're great in the summer and they're great in humidity, things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So, but I have a full array. I guess my biggest decision on any day that I'm going out is, well, which shirt should I wear? And I'm telling you, it drives me crazy now. That's the trouble with having too much of anything. Like all of a sudden,
Really,
yeah, you
really.
have to make decisions.
Yeah, you have like what did you say, 169?
169 shirts. Okay.
169.
And I still have my very first ones when I was 17. Also,
Hmm.
those were the Jams World that they changed their name. It used to be called Jams Surfline Hawaii shirts.
Oh, okay.
And I used to model them. That's how I got into these. I used to
I
model
know
them.
you are array of multi-talents.
Yeah, yeah. And so I have them. And what's shocking is I always take a medium in
Hmm.
shirts and sweaters and that.
Hmm.
And I can still get into those shirts,
Hmm.
okay, as
Hmm.
those mediums. Now, they're a little tighter than the modern mediums because as Americans got
Yes.
fatter and fatter, they
Yeah.
started to jiggle the sizes. So if you
Like that's really messed up because like when you go to Europe, you go to China or Europe or anything, like a medium there is like the different size specs to like American size specs.
absolutely, absolutely. When we were in mainland China, I'll never forget it because it was like the running joke. I mean, we'd go into these wonderful clothing
Yeah.
stores and
Hmm.
things like that, and the sizes of, their mediums were like, forget about it. Okay, they were
Yeah.
tight because there was but people in, as you know, in China, they have a largely vegetarian diets.
Yes.
They tend not to be. I remember my wife telling me when she was working uh, at the Pilgrim State and stuff. She was a nurse administrator there, and she would have people who went to visit China, especially if they were over really like obese.
Hmm.
Chinese people would go up to them and want to touch them. Okay.
What?
Yes, and I'll tell you why.
Wow.
In those days,
Hmm.
you know, you didn't you didn't find a lot of really overweight people in China. And it was to
Wow.
them, it was a mark of, oh God, these people must really be fortunate. They must really be rich and they must really be, in a good place because they obviously have a lot of food. And this isn't, I guess years ago, people say, well, like parents would say to their kids, "Oh, finished up that meal. The kids are starving in China."
China,
Well,
yeah.
when we went to China, the guides would say to us, they used to do the reverse: eat your food, eat that stuff, because their kids are starving in America.
Oh, really? They really said that?
Well, they claim that. I think it was supposed to be a
Oh,
joke.
okay.
I think it was supposed to
Hmm.
be a joke, but the point was well taken, and uh, but I will have to say one thing about the Chinese. Forget about the weight issue. Because I was there, and Ronnie and I were there in 2007 in mainland China,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I will say where they are really wonderful in terms of certain cultural attitudes
Hmm.
is the way they are so respectful of elderly people,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
and also of a person like myself who was an educator or a professor and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
They had great respect for me. And I, because when that, especially when they found out my background, they could see my white hair. Okay,
Mm.
that,
And then
that's the
you're
first
like
thing.
super smart because you have white hair.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but I know one of the coolest things ever. We're going to where the hell were we? We were taking a ferry. Maybe it was in Hong Kong. That was not really mainland China, but anyway, we were taking a ferry across to someplace, and of course, you had to pay for the ferry.
Mm-hmm.
But I think seniors went for free. Either seniors went for free, or the guy who was taking the money and selling the tickets, he took one look at my hair and he waved me. He said he pointed to my head and waved me through
Wow.
because of my age. I thought, "Are you man? This is I love this." Yeah, this is one of the perks of being an old dude, you know.
Well, it's the perks of being an American white person, I think, in China.
Yeah,
Because
you say that. You say that often.
I
Um,
do because I was in China and there's a difference of how they treat us like Asian Americans as
uh-huh.
opposed to white Americans because Asian Americans we are basically kind of looked down upon because we're whitewashed and we're not
Ah, right,
authentically Chinese because we
right,
don't speak like they'll look down on me because I don't speak Mandarin or Cantonese. Now I'm more American and
right.
I've lost some of my language. So I know Fuzhou, but I don't know the main ones. So they'll look down on me and if I'm looking too American too, like if I'm too tan, like they'll look down on me as well.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah,
hey,
like they always say like, oh, you're too dark, and they'll say it in a derogatory, like racist remark of like
really?
you look too dark, as in you look too black.
Well, that's interesting. It's also sad. Okay,
Yeah,
but here's the other part of it.
yeah.
Uh, when you speak food, if you speak
Fuzhou.
Fuzhou, do
Mm-hmm.
they understand you?
Fuzhou people will, yeah, they'll be surprised that I can speak it. So like my sister's still
No, no,
always
wait, stop. No, that's what I'm saying. So let's say you're in Beijing, let's say, okay, and
hmm
you're speaking Fuzhou, and they're speaking Mandarin. Will the
no,
Mandarin they won't understand you?
no, it's a whole nother language.
Okay,
It's
okay,
like English and Chinese, English and Mandarin.
okay. Yeah, I think you told me that once before.
Yeah, it's like a village. It's like a village dialect. So it's a
Now, let me just say this to you.
completely different.
I don't know what you were planning to talk about today, but when you just mentioned this thing about the racism in China because of the dark skin.
Hmm.
And I was having a conversation last night with one of my favorite people who's 90, he's 91.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, he's a retired professor and we have he's as not only liberal but as almost radical compared to me. Okay,
Oh, I love him. Let's put him
I'm very
on.
I mean, look, I'm very, very politically liberal.
We should do a threesome Zoom with him.
Oh, you'd love him. He's a pistol. Okay, he's a pistol. Except he's so hard of hearing, you wouldn't know what the hell you're saying. Okay,
Oh.
and he even with his hearing aids in, he is he's had
Okay.
problem. But we were talking last night about the political situation in this country,
Hmm.
and this whole thing with Trump and Trumpism and all his asshole adherents. People seem to forget that one of the reasons why. Remember, he speaks. He doesn't write much, but he speaks in really at a fourth grade level.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And as an educator, I can tell you one of the
Hmm.
things you have to do with any group of students in front of you
Hmm.
is you have to speak in ways that they can understand the
Hmm.
most complex things you're trying to teach them.
Hmm.
Okay. So what Trump does, and he's really good at it, okay, is he speaks to these people in ways that they totally get, okay? And he has made his racism, for example, his xenophobia, very concrete. There is no doubt,
Hmm.
okay? When he starts off calling Mexicans rapists and this and that and the other thing, and he makes comments about black people and stuff,
Yeah.
believe me when I tell you, his people love it because what's the biggest problem that white people are facing in this country is that they're no longer going to be the majority in this country. I think the sociologists are saying by the year 2045, this will be a minority
Hmm.
nation where
Hmm.
people of color
Yeah.
combined are going to be the majority in this country, not
Yeah.
white. And
Mhm.
so white supremacy, the white supremacists love Trump because
Mhm.
he's like, oh yeah, he's literally speaking their language. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so what people are not really understanding about what's happening in this country politically, it's still really about race. And even some of the smarter pundits
Mhm.
don't stress that the way they should be stressing it. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, but again, like going back to, I'll give you a perfect example though about how you have to change your language when you're dealing with certain kinds of people. Um, when I was one of the things I used to teach was Dante's Inferno.
Mhm.
So, without getting into all the stuff, that uh, uh, Dante had a way of he had his punishments, and the punishments really were metaphors for the nature of their sins. Okay.
Mhm.
And so, if you read a critic about what Dante did, they say, well, he employs quote symbolic retribution unquote. Okay, so now before I could mention symbolic retribution, that notion to my students,
Mhm.
I had to talk about certain punishments, and then I would say to them, I had to dumb the phrase down from symbolic retribution
Mhm.
to what it really is in more
Something
common terms.
relatable, right?
Yeah, make it relatable. And so I would say, okay, it really means let the punishment fit the crime.
Yes. So now
Okay.
they understand.
And I said, yeah. So then I say, and what the literary critics they call it, symbolic retribution. And I would give an example, my favorite example, and forget what pit of hell it was, third, fourth. Anyway, one of the characters is called Chaco. In Italian, Chaco means the hog, the pig.
Mhm.
And of course, he was a glutton,
Mhm.
obese,
Yep.
okay, and just never stopped eating, and then
Mhm.
was considered to be gross and and rude. What happened is that but his punishment was to be in the middle of uh, you know, a giant lake of manure, okay, and up to his lower lip and shit and having urine raining down on top of him.
Mhm.
Because what happens when you eat too much? You pee and poop more, right?
Yes.
So that was his metaphorical punishment. He ate to the point where he was,
In his own
So,
shit.
so uh, that was a perfect example of what you have to do when you're instructing. You got to find ways to simplify
Mhm.
something that they might find more complex. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
and when you have in a political situation, people don't understand. Like the rest of the country, like we're on the East Coast. Okay, the rest of the country doesn't. They're not on top of the news the way we are. I mean, almost
Mhm.
everybody I know, because they're again, I know mostly older, well-educated people, they watch the news, they read the news, they have their political views, and they're
Mhm.
very strong.
Yeah.
And so the reality of it was that, quite frankly, that the rest of the country doesn't do that. They're too busy. Obama was right. He said the people in the rest of the country, they're kind of bitter, okay? They're largely white, and they cling to their Bibles and they cling to their guns, okay?
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, I know a lot of people who live in the West, the Midwest, and I used to spend a lot of time in Texas. And by the way, I like Texans. The
Mhm.
Texans were very, very nice. There were people at the time. Remember, this is back in the '70s. Okay,
Mhm.
my first wife had a lot of family in Texas. So the fact was that um, I don't have a problem with a lot of those people, and they believe certain things. And as time has gone on, politicians have made them more and more intolerant,
Mhm.
based upon immigration, based upon some economics. It's really sad, and so they press the racist buttons all the time.
Yeah.
And this country is going to die
Mhm.
because of what a lot of critics call the original sin of this country, which happens to be racism.
Yeah. Well, that's how the country was formed.
But also, to be fair, and you were talking about the racist attitudes in China. You see,
Mhm. Mhm.
uh, being xenophobic, having fear of it, people, fear of the other people
Yeah.
who are not the same. This
Mhm.
is a human trait. This is something that we did to survive as a species. We got into first we had families, and then
Mhm.
we had clans, and then the clans got bigger and they went into tribes. Okay,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so your tribe said, okay, we're different from that other tribe
Yep.
across the river, and so you had to be suspicious of them until you got to know them better and
Mhm.
came to maybe have some level of trust. Okay.
Trust. Yeah.
So with one of the things I always go back to with the Central ISIP was it was the integration experiment that worked because that's what
Yes.
exactly what happened at the school. You had all
Yes.
these people, different cultures, different
Mhm.
colors,
Mhm.
races, religions, right? And they
Mhm.
got to know each other on a daily basis, and they said, "Oh wow, like oh yeah, we're kind of similar, you know."
Mhm.
We
And
may,
it was a beautiful melting pot because I think it was the perfect like experiment of the type of people and the children because you had a lot of immigrants and then you had the children who was there so that it's like a blank slate for these kids
sure,
who are
sure,
in this system now as opposed to parents who are going through a lot of the racism already and then they have the kids and then now CI is mostly Spanish now because now that probably real estate's only selling to Spanish people to CI
right,
now, so now it's all
right,
Spanish.
yeah, yeah. So no, I think that uh uh that's why I was really very proud to have worked there, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
And to see how when people allow their children and themselves to
Hmm.
interact with other people from other races and religions, how positive it can be, okay?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I really appreciate it because I really liked seeing it from both ends because
sure.
being Asian, you're kind of in the middle ground, right? So,
Yeah,
and then having the restaurant in Ronkonkoma, which is predominantly white, and then going to school in Central Islip, and you having all the mix. Like I had the mix of both, so I was
sure.
exposed to everything and
Yeah,
everyone, and seeing like both sides of the racism
yeah,
too, which was really good to be very eye opening also. And then also seeing the racism in my own culture when I went to China
yeah,
too. So
yeah.
I was exposed to everything, like everything.
But I mean, look, I was intolerance is always interesting to me because in order to be, you have to really be educated to tolerance. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Now, my parents, they had their prejudices, which I learned about later.
Mm.
Okay,
Okay.
but growing up, uh, but they never were like hostile or bitter or angry about it. It was just like, well, they had a certain. I'll tell you a great story. You'll appreciate them when I tell you. But anyway, uh, but they were very good about never saying anything negative in our home about any other race or religion. Okay, and we had my mother was a pretty devout Catholic. My father was was a nothing. He just said, "Hey, it's
He
all
was
crap to
whatever,
me."
right? He was a
He went
whatever.
to church because she dragged him in, and
Yeah, yeah.
so but I didn't realize how bigoted my mother could be.
Mm.
Okay, um, sh and I happened to mention now I was just before I got my own apartment. I guess I was in college. It was my first year of college, and I was going out with a model from Vogue. Okay,
Hmm.
because in those days I was doing a little modeling, and like I don't want to get into the whole thing, but anyway, but she was just like you'd think of a Vogue model, on the slender side, a
Hmm.
little taller than she was,
Hmm.
positively beautiful. Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
and she had just a few freckles on her face, which I thought was odd because I said, "Oh, I didn't realize that Chinese girls could be freckled because Chinese."
Hmm.
That's where I was going with this with you.
Okay. I'm like, which race are you going with this?
Yeah, that's right. So she was Chinese.
Yeah.
So I happened to mention that I was going in to Manhattan, which I used to hate to do, but I was going into Manhattan because I had a date with this girl, and I happened to mention her name. I don't want to mention it in case she ever sees it, but it was a Chinese name.
Hmm.
And she goes, "What kind of a name is that?" I said,
Mm.
"Well, it's Chinese." Chinese! And she went ballistic about my
Really?
going out with a Chinese girl.
Oh my God.
And she said, and then she made a comment, "Well, that's just as bad as going out with a black girl. Well, now, of course, I never knew my mother had that level.
You're like, I can't believe you're a racist.
Yeah, yeah, I was in shock. I was in shock. And I
Hmm.
told her, I said, excuse me, it's just a freaking date.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not getting married.
Hmm.
And what is it? And so what if I were? I mean,
Hmm.
already I was past that notion of, problems with, I dated women of all colors and religions and stuff. What is, didn't bother me. That's one thing about men, a woman is a woman is a woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah, as long as they're pretty.
That's you. You got it. They're pretty. Come on, I'm in, I
Yeah.
hope. So anyway,
I know. That's astonishing when you don't realize it, and then later on something happens, and you're like, "Oh my God, are you a racist?"
yeah,
Like,
but see, the upside of that story though
mm-hmm,
is the fact that, yeah, my mother and father did not show any of that for us as kids growing up.
mm-hmm.
That was great because a lot of kids come in and they've learned racism at literally at their mother's knees. Okay.
Yeah, but did you have Asians in your high school and growing up?
No. And we
Mm,
we had no Asians and we had one black male
hmm.
student in
So
the
then
whole.
you didn't hear the racism with Asian because they didn't have anybody in your school for your like
Right.
a friend or something. So
Hey,
then,
the
right
only yeah, the only Asians we ever saw were
at the
at the
restaurant.
Chinese restaurant. Or we were when I was a kid in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
there was down the block on the main avenue around the corner was a Chinese laundry. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I first my saw my first Asians in a Chinese laundry in Brooklyn when I was like, the second, third grade.
Yeah.
Then when we came out to Long Island, we would go to this Chinese restaurant in Farmingdale, and that was the next time, only time I ever saw Chinese
Yeah.
people in that
Yeah.
restaurant. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, the world is such a different place, and I think it's a much better place in many, many ways because there is much more diversity
Yeah. Hmm.
of color
Hmm.
and you know, religion, stuff like that,
Yeah.
And that's the other issue. See, the other issue too, these races tend to also, they are these evangelical Christians are scum, just for the record, okay?
Mhm.
They are basically white nationalists, okay? And what they call Christianity, Christ would, if he ever returned, which they believe he will, but he won't, the second coming, if there's ever a second coming, he's going to grab them by their scruffy red necks, shake them to their what brains fall out that they have left, but that guy, that brains to begin with, okay? And he's going to put them in the deepest, darkest pits of hell where they belong, okay? So, but they are the white Christian evangelists are also the worst case scenario of white nationalism. Okay,
Mhm.
so and that's another thing. They're used to being top dog, and they're gonna
Yeah,
they're gonna
yeah,
lose that. So they're gonna
yeah.
lose that. You know.
Yeah, connection with that, religion and like politics. And I saw a Netflix documentary about these priests who was, abusing like a whole school, like all of these girls and
Right.
then boys. And then he had a brother who was in the police force, and
Right.
then he became really close with like politicians and all.
Uh-huh.
So they just hid all of that abuse and
Right.
just never really did anything. He never got in trouble. Eventually the students started telling like one of the nuns, and a nun was going to report it, and then she got killed, and
Wow.
that never got solved. And so
Sure.
it was like it was all like
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
the separation of church and state and all of that is never really fully is separated.
Well, this is what's happening too. This with this right wing loony Supreme Court. They're looking to do that. I mean, what's a horror is you've got six, five of them are out and out Catholics. I think one's an Episcopalian. So you got six of these great, these Christian types. Okay, and you can't ask for more self-righteous, hypocritical moralists than those kinds of people. I know this because I grew up with this stuff. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I went
Mm-hmm.
to a Catholic university, and to be fair to the university, they were not. They were unlike a lot of the universities that are secular universities. They did believe in what they used to call, and academics or intellectuals would call uh, the free. Oh, what was it? What was the phrase? uh, the free market of ideas and stuff like that. In other words, you you could talk about anything.
Hmm.
The whole
Hmm.
idea was even if you disagreed in civil,
Yeah.
intellectual, academic ways. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I could be what I was then, a pretty wild-eyed liberal
Hmm.
surrounded by a lot of much more conservative people.
Hmm.
In fact, the one time I opened my mouth in a sociology class, I had a priest, and I defended, oh God, what was his name? A black politician. And my comment was, well, look, he's just doing what white politicians do. But the reason why he's getting such a hard time is that he's black. And the priest happened to be a Latino from, I think, Argentina or someplace like that.
Hmm.
And he was arch conservative.
Wow.
So my B plus went down to a C plus.
Really?
Okay, because I had that's what I had at the time. I mean, he really, and everybody said when they saw my grade, they go, "Oh my God, you had this course knocked." Okay, it was obvious that he was slamming you because of your comment,
Wow. Wow.
and he could get away with it. Why? Because he was a priest,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he was a priest in a Catholic institution. Okay,
Exactly. Yeah. Like they would, they wouldn't give you like one of them was like the golden boy because he was doing everything that the
sure.
priest wanted and he was getting abused, but then he finally told someone and they went back to him. So now he wasn't the golden boy and he never got, then he's just didn't get all the classes, he's failing, he's getting the bad grades, so it was
Right,
really,
right, right,
really
right.
bad.
Yeah,
It was a horrifying documentary, but
yeah,
it's just crazy.
yeah. So I have, as I said to my friend last night, my 91-year-old friend, I said, "Look, this is now a zombie country. It's the Walking Dead. This
Mhm.
country is dying.
Yeah.
Okay, doesn't know
So,
it's
but I
dead yet."
also like to give tips on this podcast. So, is there something like what, like three or five advice or tips that we can give to younger people to help change some of this?
Yeah, but I have news for you. You see, this is what's interesting too. Younger people are actually, I'm a big fan of younger people. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously, I was because I taught high school, and I know how smart and good younger people could be. I also know how shitty they can be, but that's it's like
Hmm.
again, it's always a mixed bag. But the
Hmm.
preponderance of young people nowadays tend to be much more tolerant of a lot of things. They're
Hmm.
certainly much more tolerant of homosexuality.
Hmm.
They're much more tolerant, I think, about race.
Hmm.
They are terrific about things like, transgender stuff. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
they don't have the fears that their parents and grandparents seem to have. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that my first tip is, hey, if that's how you are, if
Hmm.
this level of tolerance is who you are, don't lose it. Keep at it.
Hmm.
Don't give up. That's the first tip. In other words,
Hmm.
just make your feelings of tolerance known, and people will have to deal with that.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
I mean, there's a whole thing here, like um, even just the whole thing with weight, for example. Like well, most of the young people are pretty much against fat shaming. I mean, I
Yeah.
think maybe
Yeah. And
I'm
like
wrong.
bullying and all that stuff, like they've
Yeah,
made
yeah.
a
I
huge
mean, so for
campaign
example,
for
would
it.
be,
Hmm.
like you can't make there's certain jokes that you just can't make.
Yeah.
Like I'll make a joke like this with my wife about me. I'll say, well, like we'll go out to dinner, and I'll say,
Hmm.
oh my God, uh, I ate so much. I mean, you better get the forklift to get me into the car. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I can say that about myself.
Hmm.
If I said it about somebody else, say
Yeah.
the date of a friend of mine, had a date who was already kind of overweight and she ate a
Hmm.
lot, I'd say, oh, he's gonna have to get the forklift to get her into his car.
Hmm.
Well, that's a no-no.
Yeah. You can
I
say it
might think,
about yourself. You just can't say it about
yeah,
somebody
yeah,
else.
I might think it's really funny, and maybe somebody else who's, you know, not as super
Not
sensitive,
as
hypersensitive,
sensitive. Yeah. It's a
they,
very sensitive like culture right now too.
yeah, yeah, So I mean, there's a of course, now the problem with a lot of people is, well, it's too politically correct. You can't speak. The key is always like with my classroom. I said, look, you can say anything you want about anything. The
Yeah.
issue is you have to choose your words so they're not gross,
Hmm.
vile,
Hmm.
and vindictive.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not coarse.
Hmm.
You can get your point across without using nasty words and
Yeah.
tones.
You can insult them, but then make them laugh,
Yeah, yes, you
which
could.
is what you did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, of course. I remember I used to talk.
Hmm.
I used to have a little. There was a Schiavo fan club. There was a Krugman fan club.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah, I
And
put it in your first podcast.
yeah, I saw it. And I saw it. I left. I have it downstairs. I have it in
Yeah.
my library. But about how I used to call students you insignificant little specks of fly snot.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
and what would they do? They would laugh.
They would laugh.
They
Yeah,
would
they
laugh.
would laugh. Yeah.
Yeah. And also part of that though too is, and I used to say this to my training student teachers. I'd say, you could say anything you want to a kid.
Hmm.
And as long as they know, A, you really like them and care about them,
Hmm.
they're going to probably laugh
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
know you like them.
Yeah.
If they thought you didn't like them, then
Hmm.
they'd want your head on a plate and they'd complain to their parents, and the parents would
Hmm.
complain to the principal, and you'd be in
Hmm.
trouble. Okay?
Yeah. As long as they know that you care about them and,
Absolutely.
care about their future and how they
Sure,
feel, but
sure.
also, you're telling them the truth.
But
And
also too that again, what was the atmosphere in all of my classrooms? And that was there was always a level of humor there.
yeah.
Okay.
And
And
respect.
yes, for each other. Okay.
Hmm.
I mean, I always tell the story about when I was teaching African American literature. I did that my last 2 semesters a year for my last 12 to 14 years.
Hmm.
And I would and so white people would say to me, "Oh my God, that must have been tough." I said, "No." I said it was great. In fact, I said because I knew a lot of. I used to tell students and Trisha uh, Hicks at the time.
Hmm.
I used to tell her, "Hey, I've forgotten more black literature than you'll ever read." She tells that story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, but it was true,
Hmm.
unfortunately. I also knew probably more black history than they did. And
Hmm.
also, for example, I was heavily into, uh, you know, black blues musicians, like the old
Hmm.
ones, like,
Yeah.
Mississippi John Hurt
Hmm.
and what the hell is it? One of my Lightning Hopkins. I love Lightning Hopkins. Okay?
Hmm.
They didn't know who they were. And I used to every Friday was music day. And I
Hmm.
would play different kinds
Oh,
of
that's
music.
awesome.
Yeah, I would play blues. I would also play. I used to have every once in a while on my stereo, I hit the random button. Okay,
Hmm.
and I also had uh, you know CDs of black African tribal music.
Hmm.
Okay, my wife goes, "What the hell is that?" Okay.
You're like, what? I have an eclectic mix of music.
Yeah, and then one of my favorite things too is I introduced them to Baba Babatunde Olatunji. Now, Babatunde
Mm.
Olatunji became very popular here in the United States back in the 60s.
Hmm.
And he was a drummer. And he
Oh,
does
I
these,
love drums.
oh, he does these
I love
fantastic,
drums.
oh, he did fantastic drum solos that were
Hmm.
I play them only when Ronnie's out of the house, or I'll play them in my car
Oh,
sometimes.
if you find it, let me
Yeah,
know.
yeah, I'm telling you. And because if I play it in the house, because I play, I, I play that loud. Okay.
I want to hear it. I want to hear
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
it's
love
great.
drums.
Next time you come over, no, you have to hear it. Remind me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so anyway, yeah, I mean, stuff like that. But my point was, they would say to me, "Well, so how did you get along with the kids?" I said, "Look, I said, not only did they give me a humongous amount of respect as an
Hmm.
instructor,
Hmm.
and partly when it started, they felt they had to. I was a teacher, they were students, and they figured, oh Christ, he's white, we're black, he's really going to slam us. Okay,
Hmm.
as they got to know me better,
Hmm.
what happened was after 20 weeks with me, I got not only humongous respect, but absolute affection from those kids. Affection, okay? Where I'd see the odd, watery eye from some of the girls and say, "Oh my God, he was so good." I mean, they really had this, and of course, forget about now color. I would tell student teachers at Stony Brook and at St. Joseph's, I said, you'll know that you've had a really great classroom experience for your students and for yourself when one way or another they let you know that as far as they're concerned, this was like another family for them. It was like a family. And just like the best functional as opposed to dysfunctional family, they're going to miss this family when they go. They're going to miss this environment. They're going to miss this experience. Okay. And that can and does happen with a lot of really excellent teachers with really, who really respect and have affection for their students.
Yeah,
Okay?
then you formed a bond.
Yeah, you do. Okay, no,
So
that's okay. All right. So yeah, so I mean, this is the thing, and I think this is the issue of how you develop tolerance with young people. And
Hmm.
now here's my issue with these freaking politicians like in Florida and Texas who say, "Oh, we can't have critical race theory taught in the schools." Well, first of all, any educator will tell you it was never taught in the schools to high school kids or elementary school kids. That was a like a graduate level law school subject area. Okay,
Hmm.
it's really just about the nature of structural racism and how it affects
Hmm.
black people's lives in this
Hmm.
country right now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
in Central Islip, I've said this before in previous podcasts. I never had to mention cultural race theory. First of all, nobody would call, we wouldn't have called it that in those
Yeah.
days.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they
Because
lived
we were
culture.
the experiment.
What's that?
We were the experiment.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Those students in Central Islip, they lived what we now call critical race theory. They
Hmm.
lived in a with they saw the structural racism of our culture and experiencing it. They didn't call it that, but they said, yeah, there's a reason why
Hmm. Hmm.
we're sometimes at the bottom of the barrel, why
Yeah.
sometimes we can't get ahead easily,
Yeah.
or why somehow we don't get certain jobs or we don't get certain
Hmm.
promotions in those jobs. I mean, there's stuff like that going on. And
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
fact, I talked to you about steering with real estate when I saw
Yeah,
you.
yeah. I mean, like before in that time, we didn't know all about that because the immigrants are coming here for the American dream, and we didn't realize all the systemic, systems that were put into place in the segregation in Long Island. We didn't know any of that. We were just coming here to have the American
But
dream.
but here's what's kind of interesting and also sad is the following. When the Irish came over from Ireland and the Italians came over from Italy and all that kind of stuff, the Poles, the Germans came over. Yeah, they didn't like people who were already here weren't happy about it because it's they're going to take our jobs and take
Hmm.
our homes and it's going to get
Hmm.
crowded. But those people were white. Okay. Now, when you have immigrants of color coming over,
Hmm.
now you're saying, wait a second. We thought those people, the previous immigrants, were other,
Hmm.
different from us, but at least they were white. These people coming in, they're
Hmm.
way other because
Hmm.
they're brown and they're black and they're yellow. That's a
Yeah.
problem. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and Ben, you know what's so interesting though? People don't realize it. I'll tell you a great book that you have to read. I don't
Hmm.
forget the author. I don't have it handy. Let me see now.
Hmm.
A book called um, "The Lies My Teacher Told Me."
Oh, I
That's
love that.
yeah. That's the title of the book. It came out. Oh God, I forget when. 80s. I don't know. Next podcast, I'll tell you. Anyway, so you learn all of these things
Hmm.
that are just the teachers, history teachers tell students, and they're total baloney.
Oh
They're
my God, that's
totally
great.
wrong.
That's
Yeah.
great.
So, for example, the first white people, the first people really in America that weren't Indians were Spanish and black.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
and they entered this country through South Carolina.
Hmm.
Okay, I wish I had it in front of me. I could read it to you.
Yeah, this would be a really funny
Yeah. So
segue
yeah,
podcast, right?
no, no, really, seriously. And
Yeah.
so now, of course, it's the white people. Well, we got here, and and of course, what do? They immediately committed genocide or attempted genocide
Yeah.
of the Indians of the indigenous
They
peoples here.
they weren't the first people.
Though they were, yeah. And then, of course, I used to have. I remember in school. I was in an English department one time, and one of the more racist teachers was talking about, well, English only in
Mm.
schools.
Hmm.
And I said, excuse me.
Hmm.
I said, first of all, uh, the first ones here, the Spanish were here before the English were.
Yeah.
Okay, that's number one.
Hmm.
Number two, why it's a mark of this country's lack of intelligence, lack of sophistication,
Hmm.
that it believes that this should only be in one language. And those of us as English teachers know they don't even speak that one language very well. And that's
Hmm.
why we're teaching English to them. Their
Hmm.
grammar sucks. Their vocabulary is virtually non-existent in any
Hmm.
really, sophisticated level. So please don't tell me about how English is so great here. No,
Mhm.
sorry about that. Okay. And what the Europeans have on us that we don't have is they don't have this insularity that says, well, only English is important. They know anywhere from 3 to 6 languages. You go to Europe, everybody speaks more than one language.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
all do.
yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
And of course, what does that do? It's just like when you go traveling and you learn about different cultures and different cuisines. It does, in fact, broaden your horizons. It
Yeah.
makes you more tolerant,
More
more
tolerant.
intelligent, usually. I mean,
Hmm.
somebody might come back more bigoted, but that's rare, I found.
Yeah,
All of a
yeah.
sudden, so you go there, go, oh, now I understand why their food is what it is. Now I
Hmm.
understand why they call this that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, in certain languages, you start to realize, my God, they're like, Italian and French. I mean, they're lyrical, poetic languages. I'll give you a perfect example.
Hmm.
Uh, you know about potatoes, yeah?
Hmm.
You know what a potato is?
Um,
A potato,
yeah, a regular potato.
a
Yeah,
potato. Yeah,
yeah.
they grow in the dirt. Yeah, they grow
I,
in the
I
dirt.
think I know what a potato is.
Okay, I know you do.
I'm like, are you trying to ask me something philosophical or
No,
like?
yeah. Well, this is going to be poetic. So we call them potatoes. They grow
Hmm.
in the dirt.
Yeah.
And the first thing most of us do when we take them home from the supermarket or wherever is we wash off the dirt. We wash them.
Hmm.
Okay. So they're called a potato. But you know what the French call them?
What?
Pomme de terre. Pomme de terre. You know what that means?
Oh,
They're apples of the earth.
oh, it's so pretty.
Thank you. That's my point. You see?
That's so
Apples
beautiful.
of the earth. And I'm saying, yeah.
Apples of the earth.
Yeah. Now
And the way they
apples
say
grow
it
on
is beautiful.
apples grow on trees. They don't grow
Yeah.
in the dirt. And apples, if they're really good, they're nice and sweet and tasty.
Hmm.
But so the French look at them as something special
Yeah.
and beautiful and kind of a great fruit of nature.
That's so
Okay.
pretty.
Yeah, but that's my point. When you start to go into these other languages, you
Hmm.
realize, my God, they have such a beautiful way of expressing
Hmm.
certain things that we in English make sound so mundane,
Yeah. Potatoes
And
and
what the French do to potatoes, and by the way, I'm not talking about French fries because that didn't come from the French, but that's another story. That's another story. But anyway, but they do wonderful things with potatoes.
yeah. Well, yeah, the French they put butter and everything. It tastes great.
Butter and cream, man. That's
Yeah,
it.
butter and cream.
Because you know what they know, and this is what you learn even now, is that flavor comes from fat. Where the fat is, that's where the flavor is. Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
and Atkins from the Atkins diet fame, he said if you did his diet, right?
Yeah.
It's what is fat? Well, fat is it's usually carb free. There were no carbs, and what they found was scientifically that if you did the Atkins diet with low carbs,
Hmm.
paradoxically, you'd have lower cholesterol.
Mm. And
I
you would think,
remember,
and you
I
would think
remember,
opposite of that, but
yes,
yeah,
I remember going on the Atkins diet many moons ago. Okay. And and they have what they call the induction phase, and you go
yeah,
2 weeks like almost zero carbs if you can do
yeah,
it.
yeah. And
You
then you
can't
lose
live
like
that.
15 pounds or something, right?
Yeah, you can't live that way the rest of your life. You
It's
can
just the beginning.
just the beginning, right?
Hmm.
But what happened was, so after that first 2 weeks, and then a couple of months of doing, what you do is you add carbs to your diet. So once you get to the weight you wanted to, you say, okay, how many carbs can I have per day, and
Then
then
you
get to
know,
the weight,
yeah.
right? And what I found was, this is before I had to take Lipitor, okay,
Hmm.
that my cholesterol dropped like a stone.
Wow.
I was shocked. But
Wow.
if you read his book, it says to you, yeah, you'll lower your cholesterol.
Yeah, yeah.
But one of the myths is, oh, it's a
Well,
dangerous
yeah,
thing.
that's fascinating. I mean, I love science, so I'm
Yeah,
always
yeah.
fascinating with how things react and change and
Yeah, so I think that with a lot of things, education,
hmm.
and this is dispelling ignorance,
Hmm.
and out of that ignorance comes intolerance and racism and stuff like
Yeah.
that. There is
But
no
one
question.
thing I really appreciate about your classes is really your vocabulary too, So like all the words, like I love words. So obviously my love of words and poems came from your class. So even my vocabulary now, when I speak to certain people, they're just like,
Right.
what does that word mean? I'm like, oh, well, here, I'll Google it for you. But
I mean, it's funny. There are certain words where In fact, Krugy, I used the word with him, and he right away he blasted me. How come you had to use that word? Blah, blah, blah. I said, well, I said because you have to understand certain kinds of sesquipedalian words, which means words of six. Sesquipedalian is words of six syllables or more.
Mm.
Okay,
Hmm.
and you don't use them to try to impress people how brilliant you are, what a great vocabulary you are. The
Hmm.
issue about words is you use words which are specific to what you're trying to describe.
Hmm.
So I said to him about dealing with my stepchildren and step grandkids. I
Hmm.
said, what makes it easier for me to be objective is I don't have a consanguineous relationship with them.
Hmm.
Hello, consanguineous? What does that mean? Okay? So I could break it up. C-O-N is a prefix which means with.
Hmm.
O-U-S means full of. And then, okay, consanguine. I don't have a consanguine, which means, and also the sanguine part means blood. I don't have a blood relationship with them. So I don't have a consanguineous relationship with them. It means I don't have a blood relationship with them. They're not my, you know, they're my wife's children and grandchildren. Um, just as I always tell her, I'm just an innocent bystander who is has married into this train wreck you call a family. Okay?
You want me to cut that out?
No, absolutely not. Leave that in. Leave that in. It's a
Leave
train
it.
wreck. Trust
Oh,
me,
that's
it's a train
funny.
wreck. Okay.
Hmm.
But he was so well. I said, look, I used it because to me, I always use it when I do that. And I said, and I'm happy to explain it. I used
Hmm.
to use the word. I used to use words in classrooms like saying to students, you're being contumacious, and you're making me I just lost the word. Okay. Oh yeah, you're contumacious and you're making me obstreperous. And they're looking at me going,
Like
what the
what?
hell did
Like
he
I
say?
need to look it up. They need a dictionary.
Yeah. And then, or also what I would do is I would use words giving, I'm describing something and I'll go and I use a certain word on purpose that I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure they don't know.
Yeah.
And then I'd wait a couple of beats or a
You
couple.
wait for the looks on their faces of
No, no,
like,
but no, that's what I would do. I say, excuse me. 3 sentences ago, I used the word obstreperous and
hmm.
nobody, do you raise your hand if you know what it means?
Hmm.
Nobody's raising a hand. I said, well, why didn't you ask me?
Hmm.
You can't learn unless you ask these questions.
Yeah.
And if I'm using a word, I could, now they could argue. Some kid would say, well, I learned it, I figured out it was negative because of the context of your sentence. Yeah, that's fine. But
Hmm.
you need to get a more precise definition if you're ever going to use it
Hmm.
confidently when you're writing. Okay. So this is the kind of stuff that I used to do um, thoughtfully and really do it on purpose. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
And uh, and I think, like you said, I think people like yourself learn from that.
No, I totally did. I mean, that's where my love of words came from, like some people are just like, wow, like some people are impressed by some word. I know bigger words than the normal, of
Right.
people. So they're just like, oh well, that's a good word. What does that mean? I'm like, oh, here's the definition.
Yeah, but again, I don't want anybody to miss the point. I mean, they call it diction. Yeah, like diction is always your choice of words. Okay,
Mhm.
and so when you read someone like a Shakespeare, you say, well, he had elevated diction. In fact,
Mhm.
Shakespeare is known for having created so many words that never existed that we now use today, right?
Mhm.
But the fact of the matter is that I never realized it about how when people first met me or got used to again they got to know me a little better, they
Mhm.
viewed me a certain way, and it was because of how I spoke, and I didn't think I spoke all that differently than anybody else.
Mhm.
But I came to learn after a while was that I would use certain words.
The vocabulary, yeah,
Yeah, that I would use certain words, also pronounce them in ways that I guess that they didn't weren't familiar with,
yeah.
and that somehow they say, wow, he's really smart. Well, you know, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But the point is, yeah, I probably am. But anyway, but the point of it is, now actually, the key to, and this is what disturbs me too. This was going to be part of my theme today about how you have all these politicians trying to destroy public education,
Mhm.
which means that, okay, if we destroy public education, we're gonna eventually make you more intolerant,
Yeah.
and we can achieve our goals. And the people that we don't want you to like, you're not gonna like, and the people that we want you to like, you're gonna like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're gonna be, as a consequence, we're gonna maintain our power in this country,
Hmm.
preferably white power and Republican politics. Okay. So we can pretty much end this on that note. I just think that I've been very mindful of it lately, and my friend Charlie last night and I were talking about it, somewhat briefly but deeply,
Hmm.
you know. But I guess what I marvel at with him is, I said, Charlie, you're 91, man. I'm just
Hmm.
shocked that you still care about this stuff at 91. I don't know that I would be worried about any of this.
At 91, you're like, listen, you should just be like
You
carefree
know
and
what?
whatever. And
Hey, I'm 77 and I'm willing to give up now. Okay, but at 91, man, I would not hold it against you if you said screw
if you
this.
just didn't care about it anymore.